Because guess what? When you have drugs and guns together, that raises the bar. So if you are dealing drugs, which I don't recommend you do, but if you are, you shouldn't have your guns anywhere near the drugs. A kilo of cocaine in Chicago was going for 25 grand, but in Canada, the same kilo was going for 35,000. 60 tons of cocaine. You know how much a ton is, right? 2,000 pounds. That's 120,000 pounds a year that he was trafficking. So they say. So here's where I think this case goes. He's looking at a mandatory life sentence. Mandatory life. Judge won't have any discretion unless he snitches. And I think he's already snitched once. He's going to snitch again.
Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And he's going to react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to a fun-filled episode of Criminally Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, your board-certified criminal defense lawyer, coming to you with my pearl handle pistol cufflinks so graciously gifted to me by our former content genius that you knew and I knew is Michael Rivers, God rest his soul. Today we're reacting to Ryan Wedding. Weird name, last name, Wedding. Ryan Wedding was a snowboarder, Olympic snowboarder, and decided he'd venture out into a capitalistic adventure. And he turned around, he found out, and he fucked up. So, or well, no, he fucked up, found out. I don't know how that goes. Found out let's see, how does that go? Fucked around and find out. That's what it is. Oh, God. Anyway, but before we get to that, Ryan really should have gone to AskALawyer.com. AskALawyer.com is a very effective way for you for $49 to get legal advice from a living, breathing lawyer. So, if Ryan would have gone to AskALawyer.com, hey, is it a good idea to be a kingpin? No, it's not. Oh, okay, thanks. Would have saved himself a huge load of trouble. Or if you have a grandma in your basement and she's sitting there in her Cheeto-stained underwear and she's wanting to, have her friends over and start a meth lab in your basement. Well, how do I get my grandma out of there? You go to AskALawyer.com. You have an issue with your landlord. You've got a contract dispute. Go to AskALawyer.com. And if you're doing your own legal research, AI component trained in all the 50 states, same people that brought you eForm and eSign, AskALawyer.com. They're a very loyal sponsor to the channel, so go give them some love. All right. So who is he? He was born in Thunder Bay, Ontario, which is right close to Minnesota. His family was involved in winter sports. His grandparents owned a ski resort, and his uncle was the director of a ski school. His father was a competitive skier, but he decided to snowboard instead. Those goddamn snowboarders. I ski race. Here's a picture of me racing. This is what a real racer looks like. All right. At the age of 15, Ryan made the Canadian national ski team. He won a bronze medal in the parallel giant slalom. How do you do perpendicular giant slalom? GS that's the race I do in 1999. And then he just won a silver in 2001, so he's getting better. His coach described him as a kid without fear. Oh, I tell you, I'm about to go to Italy to go watch Lindsey Vonn race in the downhill and the Super G. And you talk about, they're going like 70, 80 miles an hour down these hills in some spots. And you really have to be strong. In 2002, in Salt Lake City, he competes for the Team Canada in the giant slalom, and he finished 24th. Looks like he went sliding down backwards. That's when he stopped snowboarding. He moved to Vancouver. And while there, he started bodybuilding and became a bouncer, and he dropped out of college. So just all, not building anymore, just kind of dabbling in this and that. But instead of college, he started growing marijuana. Now, keep in mind, marijuana in some instances is legal. But for the most part, it's illegal federally. So in 2006, his farm was raided, and they had 6,800 plants, a gun, and $10 million in cash. So he was flush. I think it's just amazing that people would put their gun and their drugs and their money on the same spot. Because guess what? When you have drugs and guns together, that raises the bar. So if you are dealing drugs, which I don't recommend you do, but if you are, you shouldn't have your guns anywhere near the drugs. Or you shouldn't have your cash anywhere near. It should be in a different house altogether. Ryan wasn't on the property at the time, and there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. How is that? After several bad real estate investments, Ryan was broke. So he teamed up with Iranian and Russian cocaine smugglers, as one would naturally do. Let's just look at this video here.
The FBI first became aware of Ryan Wedding's activities on June 10, 2008, when 3 men landed at LAX San Diego. One Russian, the other Persian, and the third Canadian.
Now keep in mind, all these cases are all built by what? Snitches.
They weren't there for business meetings or sightseeing. They were there to buy 24 kilos of cocaine from a former KGB agent.
That sounds like a business meeting.
When they landed, the former KGB agent asked to see the money. However, the Canadian refused, saying, "Obviously, I didn't put it in my fucking suitcase." This angered the ex-agent, but they found middle ground. They'd first buy 1 kilo, inspect it, then return for the rest. The next day, the Persian and Canadian visited a Persian rug store to pick up $120,000 in cash wrapped in...
You ever see the movie Blow with Johnny Depp? I mean, incredible movie. But you watch how he morphs into the real guy, who's just as ugly as sin, and he's just sitting in prison rotting away because he got a really, really, really long sentence. There is no way, gentlemen and ladies, to use or deal in this day and age hard drugs. There just isn't. They're going to find you sooner or later. Even one deal.
Wrapped in newspaper and hid it in their hotel room. On June 13th, the Russian left the hotel with $17,000 to buy the sample, while the other 2 waited in the room. After an hour and a half, they grew restless, hungry. They stepped out to get food and walked straight into an FBI trap.
Oh, big surprise there. Remember John DeLorean? He got set up by the feds.
The deal had been a setup from the start. Trofimov, the ex-KGB agent, was an FBI informant wearing a wire, and the cocaine was supplied by the Bureau. The Russian and the Persian pled guilty, but the Canadian did not. At his 2010 sentencing, he pleaded with the judge, "What I did was completely out of character for me, and it's a personal mission of mine to rebuild my reputation. As an athlete, I was always taught that there are no second chances, and, well, I'm here asking for exactly that." The man asking for forgiveness was none other than the Olympic snowboarder Ryan Wedding. The judge showed leniency, handing down a sentence that seemed merciful at the time, a decision that would lead to a catastrophic series of events.
Why in the fuck would you take another swing at this if at first you don't succeed? You know, I mean, the FBI and the DEA and the local drug task force people have a network of snitches. And so you don't know when you are going to a meeting who's going to be there, whether you're going to get popped or not. And I couldn't take that stress.
15 years later, Ryan would be on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted for murders all across North America and for being the kingpin of a $1 billion international drug empire.
That took a big turn, didn't it? Jesus Christ. So that last video we just saw was from a channel called Brew, B-R-E-W. Well done, Brew. So Wedding was dead to rights, says Brett Kalina, a former FBI agent who arrested him. He was on the recordings from the second he stepped down on U.S. soil. He was very controlled. Kalina remembers, once we read him his rights, he didn't say anything. And the few instances that we did have a chance to interact with him, when we were either picking him up from the jail or dropping him off to make a proffer, you know what a proffer is, snitching, he was kind of like, you're not getting anything from me. You know, you had the world by the ass, so it seems. You know, you were this snowboarder or, skier, snowboarder. You were qualified for the Olympics. You silvered. I mean, that's something. And yeah, and you came from privilege. Is that not enough for you? So in the 2 years between arrest and conviction, he was held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in San Diego. And that's known for housing a lot of cartel folks. And this is what former FBI agent said. He really did just turn into a much better drug dealer than he ever was when he started with us. Unbelievable. So conspiracy to traffic cocaine, if the conditions are met, with a minimum of 10 years, mandatory minimum of 10 years when you're dealing with 5 kilos of cocaine or more. And here's the thing. If you have a prior, that can go up. If you have firearms, that can exacerbate it. And when it's a 10-year mandatory minimum, there's nothing the judge can do other than give you the 10-year mandatory minimum unless you meet one of the qualifications. Safety valve is one, and there's a whole bunch of conditions, but this guy would not qualify for the safety valve. If there are guns involved, you don't qualify for the safety valve. And the other thing is unless you become a snitch. In May 2010, Wedding's sentence was reduced to 4 years because he snitched. I guarantee it. The U.S. government agreed it would not stop a transfer to Canada to finish his sentence on the condition that he drop an appeal and forfeit $121,000. Wedding was then sent to a federal correctional institute in Texas. He was then deported back to Canada. When you're dealing with murders across the board, the guidelines for that is life. And in some case, the feds have the death penalty. So here's what prison can do for you. You can do one of two things. It can either be a stepping stone to more criminal activity through the people that you meet, or it could be a wake-up call. Now, in this case, it was a stepping stone. And this is where it gets kind of interesting because he winds up getting related to El Chapo. At the same time, the drug world in Canada was in flux. Control went from the mob and Hells Angels to Chapo Guzman, who made inroads into Canada, catching the DEA off guard. A kilo of cocaine in Chicago was going for $25,000, but in Canada, the same kilo was going for $35,000. And another benefit is that Canada is much more lenient on drug enforcement, so they say. So in 2013, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police began targeting 2 Canadians involved in large-scale trafficking of cocaine. And they were planning on importing 1,000 kilos from the Caribbean to Newfoundland. From there, they would haul it into trucks in Toronto and Montreal. From either city, this also allowed them easier access to New York City. And who at this time was filing for bankruptcy? Our good friend, Mr. Wedding. These hub and spoke operations is, you have a hub, in other words, like Toronto, and then it splinters off. Like Chicago is a hub, and then, Minneapolis is a stopover, Fargo is a stopover, Madison, Wisconsin, Indianapolis, and you can kind of branch out from there. So they call this Operation Harrington. And while undercover, investigators got introduced to Ryan Wedding, the man in charge. How did he become this kingpin? The previous man in charge had been gunned down in British Columbia the year before. Here's the thing. The cartel is no fucking organization to mess around with. I have who is now a close friend who was doing work for them a long time ago. Long time, almost 20 years ago now, 22, 23 years ago. In order to do work for them and make money, he had to give them his mother's address. He had to, they had to meet the family. So if you fuck them over, they're going to kill your family. I had another client who was forced to buy guns for the cartel when they showed up at his mother's house. They killed his grandmother 20 years earlier because she wouldn't let them use her field as an airfield. So they're nothing to mess around with. So undercover agents met with Ryan Wedding as someone with a sailboat who could bring boats to and from the Caribbean for Ryan. This deal was called off, but in April 2015, the French Navy intercepted a supply boat carrying 212 kilos, in other words, $10 million worth of cocaine, and arrests were made. 15 warrants were out, and Ryan was one of those arrests. The guidelines on something like this is through the roof, especially if there's homicides involved. A man who introduced Ryan to the undercover agents, Filipos Calaros, was one of the 15 arrested, and he was sentenced to 1 day in prison. I wonder why that is. Calaros was in a coffee shop in Montreal when a man entered the cafe and shot Calaros, and he was killed, obviously. Ryan Wedding was never arrested for this murder or for his plans to import cocaine to Canada. Instead, he fled to Mexico. It's so much easier to get somebody back from Mexico than it used to be. Not as much has been publicly shared about his actions or location. How long Wedding can evade capture is an open question. It's pretty hard, and this is a statement from the Department of Justice. It's pretty hard to hide a 6'4" white guy, Kalina said. He's in a part of the world where he's going to totally stick out. That's true, actually. And I don't see him being any kind of guy who is okay hiding out in a bunker for the next 20 years. Here's the thing. The Department of Justice and the FBI are incredibly patient. I had a case that was in 2004. They didn't indict him until like 5 years later. And there's 27 people involved in that indictment. So at the time, my client was collecting money for the cartel to pay me in a DUI case. Never do that. Never commit a felony to avoid a misdemeanor. Dudes, I mean, it's criminal law 101. But they didn't do anything with that case for 5 years. So it was like 2009 when they finally indicted him. By then he had 2 children. He had gotten sober. He had a wife. He started his own business. I mean, he was a completely different person in 5 years. And so he didn't really snitch at all. And because he was out of the business, he couldn't snitch. And so the judge wound up giving him a departure that he didn't necessarily deserve. And it's just crazy that happens. So the Department of Justice has said that Ryan Wedding, with connections to the Sinaloa Cartel, was moving 60 tons of cocaine each year, valued at $500 million. 60 tons. How does a dumb shit, get involved in this? Like all drug operations, murder is inevitable. Violence, guns, and murder are part and parcel of the drug trade. Ryan has been linked to at least 4 murders and 1 attempted murder, 2 of which were family members who had nothing to do with drugs and instead were victims of mistaken identity. How stupid is that? He also ordered the murder of a federal witness, so the FBI had a $50,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of Ryan. And in early 2025, a witness for the feds, Jonathan Acevedo Garcia, was shot to death in a Colombian mall. Jonathan had been a longtime collaborator with Ryan, going back to 2008 when they met in prison in Texas. When Ryan found out that Jonathan was cooperating with the feds, a bounty was placed on his head. Reports say the bounty was as high as $5 million. This just floors me. A new charge for Ryan, murder and witness retaliation. So Ryan was added to the 10 most wanted list in 2025. And the same day, the reward was increased to 10 million and then later to 15 million. So this guy's wanted. I mean, look at that. I mean, honestly, how would you feel if your kid was on the fucking 10 most wanted list? Oh, Jesus Christ. I mean, that's bad. Let's see what Pam Bondi, one of my favorite people, has to say.
National criminal enterprise. He's currently on the FBI's and has been top 10 most wanted list. He controls one of the most prolific and violent drug trafficking organizations in this world. He is currently the largest distributor of cocaine in Canada. Wedding collaborates closely with the Sinaloa Cartel, a foreign terrorist organization, to flood not only American but also Canadian communities with cocaine coming from Colombia. His organization is responsible for importing approximately 60 metric tons of cocaine a year into Los Angeles via semi-truck.
Okay, I just read all that shit to you, okay? I'm not a fan of Pam Bondi, and I'm not going to try to hide it. Oh, let's listen to somebody else that I'm a real fan of, Kash Patel.
As the Attorney General mentioned, this is an indictment.
Okay, that's all I want to hear from him.
No, watch this one because there's some good stuff here.
Okay.
Indictment, an additional indictment, an arrest of multiple subjects, nearly a dozen more, and that brings the total to approximately 36 indicted. And you'll hear the details from the tremendous team established here by the Attorney General. You do not get to be a drug kingpin and evade the law. Make no mistake about it. Ryan Wedding is a modern-day iteration of Pablo Escobar.
Pablo Escobar, I get it. I wish he would just tie his tie normally. I don't like to see. I hate it when guys are open their collar.
Pablo Escobar. He's a modern-day iteration of El Chapo Guzman. This Justice Department and this FBI will work with our Canadian counterparts and the government officials across the world to bring him to justice. He is responsible for engineering a narco-trafficking and narco-terrorism program that we have not seen in a long time.
But isn't it the kind of person that you typically pardon? Like the convicted drug trafficker, the former leader of Honduras? Didn't we let him go?
The murder also involved a Canadian website, as the Attorney General discussed, which claimed to be a news outlet. This so-called news outlet, the Dirty News, was paid by a co-defendant to post a photograph of the victim, witness, and his wife online so that he could be hunted down and killed. Law enforcement yesterday seized that website pursuant to a judicially authorized warrant. That website no longer exists. And I want to just add a couple things here. Mr. Wedding is the most prolific cocaine trafficker in Canada, but he used Southern California, my district, as a hub for his logistics to move the cocaine. The reason he selected California is because of California's weak laws.
California has the same federal laws as the rest of the United States
On crime. They knew if they were popped with cocaine in California, they probably wouldn't get much of.
That's just bullshit. I mean, the federal law applies exactly the same in California as it does in New York, as it does in Florida, as it does in DC, as it does in Minnesota, as it does in Texas, as it does in Washington State, as it does in Maine. You know, the federal guidelines are the federal guidelines.
A sentence. I want to note the lawyer that we arrested yesterday. We arrested 12 people yesterday in an international takedown. You're going to hear more about that.
Here's the other thing. If you're a lawyer for one of these guys, guess what you're doing? If you're taking in fees from these guys, you're taking in drug money. You can't do that. You have to, sometimes, we're asked to source our funds, and I asked the prosecutor, hey, is it okay if I take this fee from this guy? Well, and sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no, depending upon what the situation is.
One of which is his lawyer in Canada. His lawyer advised him to kill this witness. His lawyer told,
moron, your bus is leaving. There's one of the crucial rules about becoming a criminal defense lawyer. If someone's got to go to jail, make sure it's the client, not you.
His lawyer told him if you kill this witness, the case would be dismissed. That lawyer is now in custody, and he'll be.
And how did they get that information?
He'll be extradited and brought to justice here in the United States. So all this to say, it doesn't matter who you are or where you are. When the United States government and this Department of Justice decides we're going after someone, we're going to get you.
Unbelievable. How fucking stupid was that for the lawyer? So let's watch Ryan's Instagram. The internet has been talking a lot about an Instagram account, possibly owned by Ryan. This account, he was bragging about taunting the FBI.
Is an accused drug kingpin on the run bragging about his lavish life on Instagram. Canadian Ryan Wedding is a former Olympian on the FBI's most wanted list for allegedly running a transnational criminal enterprise that smuggled tons of cocaine. The FBI can't find him, but over on Instagram, an account called Boss Ryan W shows off a luxury watch and motorcycles. The account has quickly gained more than 50,000 followers and was promoted as being real in this X post with over 700,000 views. But here's the thing, the photos shared by the account are fake and generated by AI. Take a look at this sculpture. The text on the metal is garbled. In this watch, the numbers are also warped and nonsensical. This one's trickier because that does look like Ryan Wedding, but look closely and the rotor is a jumbled mess. Just for good measure, look at these motorcycles. The text is also warped and misspelled. And this image, which says the bike was gifted by MotoGP champion Marc Marquez, well, a representative for Marquez told me the writing and the signature on the photo were not made by Mark. So what's going on here? Instagram shows the account is based in Bolivia and has changed its username 7 times. I contacted the person running the account and they said they are Ryan Wedding, but they wouldn't provide any proof, and as we've shown, the content they're sharing is fake.
So in breaking news, Ryan Wedding got caught, and this is just like last Friday.
Former Olympic snowboarder turned alleged drug kingpin has now been arrested. Law enforcement officials say he had been on the run from authorities in the U.S. and Mexico. Today, Ryan Wedding brought back to the U.S. on a government plane in Ontario, California. One of the FBI's 10 most wanted now in custody and on U.S. soil, touching down at an airport outside of Los Angeles hours.
That doesn't look too fake, does it?
After his arrest in Mexico. For more than a year, an intense manhunt has been underway for Ryan Wedding, a former Canadian snowboarder who competed in the 2002 Winter Olympics turned alleged drug kingpin.
He went from an Olympic snowboarder to the largest narco trafficker in modern times. He is a modern-day El Chapo. He is a modern-day Pablo Escobar, and he thought he could evade justice.
Authorities say Wedding was known to have been hiding out in Mexico under a...
You know, wouldn't you rather be in Cortina, Italy, kind of training right now? You know, wouldn't you rather be heading towards the Olympics? I mean, to what end is this? I mean, sure, a lot of money, but it's all short money. Where's El Chapo now? In jail, and he's never getting out. He's in Supermax. Where is Ryan now? He's in federal custody. He's not getting out.
Number of different aliases. The FBI says he was being protected by the Sinaloa Cartel. Federal prosecutors believe he's been responsible for moving more than $1 billion a year worth of cocaine into the U.S., utilizing a network of trucks crossing the border. Mexican authorities telling ABC News Wedding surrendered at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City. Sources say it came after weeks of negotiating his surrender.
Did he turn himself in, or was there an operation that took him down?
Without getting into operational sensitivities, Ryan Wedding was apprehended last night in Mexico City, and to safeguard the integrity of the ongoing investigation, we will not go into that.
The case had been closing in on Wedding for months. In November, a superseding indictment alleged Wedding had a witness murdered who was set to testify against him.
So if you get indicted on something, they can add to the indictment, you know, or even take away, but mostly they add. And if they add a new charge or they add something to it, they call it a superseding indictment. Just replaces the old indictment.
Wedding is charged with multiple counts, including running a criminal enterprise and murder, charges that could put him in prison for the rest of his life if convicted. We are told Wedding will remain in custody in the Los Angeles area. He is expected.
So once you're arrested, they'll have a detention hearing. And it will be presumed that he's detained, right? In other words, there's a presumption that he has to try to overcome and prove that there's a set of conditions that can assure his reappearance and the safety of the community. But that ain't going to happen. He's not going to leave custody. He's a fugitive, number one. And number two, it's a homicide case, you know, and a drug case, a big drug case. So you think El Chapo, did he get out? No, he didn't. Unbelievable. So what was happening behind the scenes, according to CBC News in Canada, Kash Patel portrayed Wedding as a modern-day Pablo Escobar who once headed the fearsome Medellin cartel in Colombia and has also compared him to Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. You know, how do you get this? You know, how do you fall so far from grace? Shoutout says Wedding managed to move and operate in Mexico City, living between top hotels there while under the protective supervision of Los Chapitos, the faction of the Sinaloa Cartel still controlled by those loyal to the sons of El Chapo. Kind of unbelievable. For reasons still unknown, Los Chapitos decided to pull the backing that he had in Mexico, and he had to find his own protection, which just shows you there's no loyalty among thieves, right? This left Wedding powerless with the very real threat of assassination hanging over him. So he knew his days were numbered. So without protection of Los Chapitos, Shoutout says Wedding became a target for those loyal to Ishmael El Mayo Zambada Garcia, one of the leaders of the Sinaloa Cartel. So one of El Chapo's sons betrayed Zambada in July 2024 and handed him over to U.S. authorities, sparking a civil war within the cartel that has left thousands dead and disappeared from Sinaloa. Unbelievable, honestly, when you think about this. And it's just, how do you go from being a snowboarder to a kingpin at this level? Let's see, Wedding was too trusting of Cartel, and analysts say. That was Ryan's problem. He trusted exclusively in Los Chapitos, and Los Chapitos have betrayal tattoo on their skin, Shoutout says. That's how Los Chapitos have survived for so many years. They've betrayed associates, friends, collaborators, and Ryan was no exception. You know, you're an asset until you become a liability, and they cut you loose. He's lucky he's alive. Shoutout says that it seemed Los Chapitos began to provide Mexican authorities with information about Wedding, which may have led to the raids in late December, targeting several properties linked to the Canadian. Unbelievable. So now there's snitches against him. So let me just tell you, when you're on the run, number one, just take one of the most famous examples, Saddam Hussein. He ran out of support, right? And so he was in a fucking spider hole in the ground, where you keep vegetables and stuff cool. He was caught with like $70 million cash. I think that's what he had. But he couldn't go anywhere. So Ryan's facing the same situation. You can't go anywhere, even though you have probably a lot of cash. He was running out of options. So what happens? He's got an indictment in the U.S. He's not liked by the cartel. So he's either going to get killed or taken into prison. So he really ran out of options. So his charges are drug trafficking conspiracy, continuing criminal enterprise, basically RICO, murder, witness intimidation, money laundering, and international financial crimes. The drug trade is just, it seems like you could make a bunch of money really quick, right? It doesn't. It comes at a cost. It comes at a real cost. If you're thinking about doing this, don't. You think anybody can take my boat from me? No, because it's paid for. I have a beautiful 50-foot yacht that I brought up from Fort Lauderdale. Legitimately. Nobody can take that from me. I have a law practice that I've had for almost 30 years. Do things the right way. I don't have to look over my shoulder. I wake up in the morning with a clear conscience and a beautiful woman by my side. A really beautiful woman. Life is good. This shit is so fucking dangerous. And some people are, addicted to danger and drugs. I just don't understand what could turn somebody like that. It's certainly not socially acceptable. I guess that's what's always guided me. I want to be liked by my peers. I wanted to be accepted by my family. Whether it's my wife at the time or my children for sure, or, my mother and father, as I was coming of age. I always wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to have that respect, and this kind of shit, you don't get that kind of respect. How many people, if you went to a dinner party, what do you do, Fred? Well, I'm running the Sinaloa Cartel, and I just caught today, I murdered 7 people, and boy, did they bitch, and 60 tons of cocaine. You know how much a ton is, right? 2,000 pounds. That's 120,000 pounds a year that he was trafficking. So they say. So here's where I think this case goes. He's looking at a mandatory life sentence. Mandatory life. Judge won't have any discretion unless he snitches. And I think he's already snitched once. He's going to snitch again. But what does he get for that snitching? Maybe with the possibility of parole. Maybe he gets out in 20 years. I don't know. It's all up to the judge. And it's got to be significant. They don't do downstreamers. In other words, you don't cooperate against people who are have a lower role than you did. You would go upstream. Like another El Chapo Guzman, or Pablo Escobar. That's the kind of people that they want. I honestly think, I don't know why they wouldn't go after these guys militarily, to be honest with you, because they're so fucking dangerous. We'll see what happens. If he gets anything less than a life sentence, he snitched. He did. There won't be any public record of it, And, you will see if you log on to PACER, which is the U.S. government court system, electronic filing system. If you go on there and you see something, sealed document, that's probably his snitch paperwork. You heard them talking about moving him for a proffer. A proffer is where you snitch. A proffer is where you sit down with the government, you tell them everything you know, and you cooperate against this person, this person, this person. And if you do that well enough, you get substantial assistance of what they call a 5K departure. I'm not a snitch lawyer, so I don't really represent a whole lot of snitches. So it's a little foreign to me, but that's what happens. That's how all the government's drug cases are created. Snitch testimony, 100%. Whether he gets out, in a shorter period and is in witness protection, I personally have not seen that, so I don't know how they do that these days. But that is definitely a possibility, especially when, the situation with him is so dire. That's our little update on Ryan Wedding, who just got picked up yesterday, Friday, and now he's in government custody. They'll have a detention hearing, but he'll be detained. He's going to be sitting in jail until this case is heard and taken care of. So we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Make sure you subscribe, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, sign up for Patreon, go to Facebook, go to CLRBruceRivers.com for all your merch needs, and we'll see you next time on Criminal Lawyer Reacts.
Just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. 23-hour lockdown, please, is at my